So, when I say the word meditation, what pops into your head? Probably something calm, right? Maybe a sleek, modern app on your phone. But what if I told you the real story of meditation is way older, way more widespread, and, get this, way more Western than you probably think? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that hidden history.
I mean, let's be real. We live in a world where inner peace feels like it's just a download away. Apps like Calm and Headspace have totally mainstreamed mindfulness. It's become our go-to tool for dealing with the craziness of modern life. And it feels like a very new solution to a very old problem.
Well, that's the big question we're diving into. We almost always link mindfulness with Eastern traditions, but today, we're going to flip that script. We're going to trace this hidden thread of contemplative practice that's been woven through Western history for thousands of years, basically hiding in plain sight.
Okay, Section 1, the hidden Western roots. To really get this, we need to rewind the clock, and I mean way back, long before the first line of code was written for a mindfulness app, to see where these ideas actually started.
This timeline really puts it into perspective, right? It shows just how deep these roots go. We're talking about ancient Greek philosophers like Socrates and Pythagoras exploring the inner self, Christian desert fathers in Egypt seeking stillness, Jewish mystics journeying toward the divine, and early Sufi masters in Islam creating their own formal methods. This is not some new trend, it's a forgotten heritage.
All right, Section 2, Ancient Practices. So the timeline gives us the when, but now let's get into the how and the why. Let's take a closer look at these traditions, because their goal wasn't just to lower your stress levels, it was about forging a profound spiritual connection.
We'll kick things off with Judaism, which has this surprisingly rich and deep history of meditative practices. The goal here was often about elevating your consciousness to build a direct, personal relationship with the divine. I mean, this is a tradition that goes all the way back to biblical figures like Isaac, who is described as meditating out in the fields.
And the methods they came up with are incredibly diverse. You've got Hippodut, which is kind of like having a spontaneous, heartfelt conversation with God, all by yourself. Then there's deep contemplation on the sacred names of God. And in the mystical tradition of Kabbalah, people use these complex visualizations based on the Sephirot. You can think of those as a sort of map of divine qualities to guide their spiritual journey upward.
This verse from the Psalms, it perfectly captures the heart of a practice called Shaviti. It's all about cultivating a constant, moment-to-moment awareness of the divine presence. It's mindfulness, for sure, but with a deeply devotional focus.
And you know, this idea of constant awareness really echoes in the Christian tradition, which also developed some incredibly powerful contemplative practices. Here, the central goal was often described as achieving a perfect union with God. One of the most lasting methods is Lectio Divina, or divine reading, which was formally laid out back in the 12th century. It's this really beautiful, structured four-step process. First, you read a sacred text, then you meditate on what it means, then you respond with your own prayer, and finally, you just rest in silence, totally open to that divine presence.
And this quote from the Apostle Paul really points to the ultimate goal. See, it's not just about feeling better, it's about a fundamental transformation of your mind and spirit. We find a really similar focus on devotion and interchange in Islam, especially within its mystical Sufi traditions. Here, the meditative practices often revolve around the idea of surrender to God through constant remembrance, which is known as dhikr.
This practice of remembrance has a few different forms. Dhikr can be a rhythmic repetition of divine names, almost like a chant. Tafakkur involves this deep contemplation of the signs of God that you can see in nature and all of creation. And then there's muraqabah, a really powerful Sufi practice of silent awareness. It's like being a vigilant watchman over your own heart, keeping it always focused on the divine.
Just as this verse from the Quran suggests, the core purpose is to find peace and rest for the heart, not by escaping the world, but through focused devotion and remembrance.
All right, Section 6, the Great Synthesis. So, we've got these incredibly rich, ancient streams of contemplative practice, all with this deep spiritual focus, but that feels like a world away from the mindfulness apps on our phones, right? So what happened? How did we get from divine union to stress reduction? This is where the story takes a fascinating modern turn.
A key figure, maybe the key figure in this whole shift, is John Kabat-Zinn. He was absolutely instrumental in taking the core principles of mindfulness, which were inspired by Buddhist traditions, and adapting them for a secular clinical setting. He developed this program, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR.
And the absolute genius of it was taking the core techniques of mindfulness and yoga, stripping them of their religious dogma, and reframing them in a secular, scientific language. This created a powerful therapeutic tool that could finally be studied by science and used in hospitals to help people with everything from chronic pain to anxiety.
And this quote just brilliantly captures that shift in philosophy. The goal of modern mindfulness isn't to create some perfectly calm, wave-free mind. It's about developing the skill and the resilience to navigate the inevitable waves of life.
Now, what's really fascinating about this slide is how it just crystallizes the differences. While modern Western meditation is all about the individual psyche and finding emotional balance, other traditions operate in completely different frameworks. For instance, Jainism is built on this idea of an eternal soul, the jiva, that has to be purified to achieve liberation. Buddhism, on the other hand, introduces the concept of anatta, or no permanent self, and aims for nirvana, the total end of suffering. So the crucial takeaway here is that the why behind the practice can be profoundly different.
So this secular therapeutic approach opened the floodgates for science to step in and ask a pretty simple question. Does this stuff actually work? And the answer, it turns out, has been a resounding yes.
For example, studies on MBSR have shown it can tangibly reduce levels of cortisol, which is the body's main stress hormone. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about creating real, measurable physiological change in your body.
And the list of scientifically validated benefits just goes on. We're talking improved mental health, better focus and productivity, greater emotional resilience, and even increased self-awareness and empathy. It's this scientific backing that has launched meditation into corporate wellness programs, schools, and therapists' offices everywhere.
Okay, Section 8, a universal practice. So when we pull the lens all the way back, that initial question, is it Eastern or Western, it kind of starts to dissolve. What we're really seeing is a universal human impulse to look inward. Whether the goal is connecting with God, liberation from suffering, or just managing stress, the fundamental practice is the same.
From the Desert Fathers to modern brain scanners, the practice has evolved dramatically. And it leaves us with a fascinating final thought to chew on. As this ancient wisdom continues to merge with modern science, what new forms is it going to take? What does the future of inner peace even look like?